Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And today we've got someone who's been in the podcasting game, spitting truth for many years, many more years than I, and has contributed to this plethora of audio. I want to call it the Library of Alexandria, but can't steal that from my man Miguel Connor over at Aeon Byte. But that's what it is. I mean, you go to this guy's RSS feed and it is packed with information, not just new interviews, but old interviews. It's a pleasure to have you here on the show, Chris. Chris from Forbidden Knowledge News. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Mark, thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. Looking forward to our conversation, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And for folks who are not aware, possibly, how did you get into this and tell us a little bit about your show?
Oh man, this was back in probably about 2014. I had just started to wake up myself and just realize some of the things that I had been lied to about my whole life and started to research it. Started to go after, a bunch of books and do deep dives on YouTube and just absorb information. And I was like, man, this seems like it. Some people should know about this. So I started a little Facebook blog and it kind of picked up steam, became popular. And, the more I'd learn, the more I'd be like, well, I need to get people smarter than myself talking about this to help people understand some of these, crazy aspects of these conspiracies and just actually truths we know now. So many aspects of the conspiracy world has become truth in the past couple of years. But yeah, the Facebook thing picked up steam and I kept doing that for a while. And then I think it was early 2017, I decided to start a YouTube channel and do interviews with some of the folks I'd been talking to. And I would just start contacting some of my, favorite researchers, authors, people that knew more about these topics than myself, and decided to start doing little hour and a half interviews with them on YouTube. And that picked up even more. And then one of my friends, Charlie Robinson, you probably know him, suggested a podcast, and that took off from there. And that's how Forbidden Knowledge News was born. And now we actually feature a podcast just like you're doing with your network. We're featuring a few of our own on our website, and it's been an amazing journey. I've met so many extraordinary people that I never thought I'd meet in my life. And, I was able to do this for a living now. And I never thought in a million years I'd be able to be doing this. So it's a blessing. And sometimes I feel like I'm in an alternate reality, which is pretty crazy. But that's how it really all started for me.
Yeah, and I tend to feel that way too. But on the point of doing this full time, I mean, what an inspiration, man. I really resonate with that. And I heard you mention that on a conversation you had with Joe Roop, Lighting of the Void, another friend of the show. And yeah, man, that's the thing that I noticed maybe 9 years ago now, 2012, just coming out of high school, really not knowing anywhere to find this kind of information other than the few books that I had stumbled across, and podcasting, when I eventually did find it some many years later, it was like, oh wow, this is where everybody's at, but it felt like the internet in that time when you started was much freer. And I
Oh, yeah.
wonder, considering what you see today happening, I mean, with people getting just straight up kicked off of YouTube overnight and all of this kind of stuff. I mean, was the landscape, did it feel open back then, or was
Oh,
there
it
still
was
that
it was
element
much
of,
different. Like in 2014, 15, when I started uploading to YouTube, the growth was like they were featuring my videos in the suggestions, on some of the main feeds on YouTube. I was monetized within a few months. I was getting, I got a few thousand subscribers within a few months, and then it just would take off because they were actually, suggesting my videos. I was running in their their ads were running on my channel. I was actually monetized. I was actually making money from YouTube. And at that time, I hadn't even started the podcast, and it was blowing up. And I noticed it was about 2016. It was actually the day after they pulled Alex Jones's show. I noticed my numbers just stopped. I'm like, whoa, I'm not getting any subscribers. And that was like, a few days would go by, I'd get 2 or 3 subscribers, and my video count, the view count dropped like extremely low. Like it was less than half the views that I would be getting, and it kept getting less and less. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And that's when I noticed that it really started, was like right after they pulled Alex Jones's stuff, and in that 2016 time frame. And they just it shadow banned completely after that, not only on YouTube but Facebook. And it was like around that time, about 2015, about a year before that, I'd started the podcast. And luckily they're not doing that I've noticed with podcasting, which is a blessing. We're able to get our message out that way. But that's when I really noticed it started. And it was like they put the brakes on everything. Any type of promotion or advertising or anything like that, you had to do yourself. Everything was taken over by the scumbags in control, and the censorship would just started to run rampant after that.
Right. Right. And it is interesting. Like you mentioned that podcasting seems to be immune to it. And you're right. I mean, just based on the actual
So far, knock on
yeah,
wood.
yeah, the way it works, we're hosting this stuff ourselves out of our own pocket. These companies that host the podcasts are sort of not in the same position that YouTube is, right? And I think as a host, we have a different perspective on it. And as someone who's been doing this much longer than me, it was definitely something I wanted to ask you about. But it does feel like podcasting is this open playing field, and I'm not sure how much of the 2.0 stuff you're aware of, but Adam Curry recently has done a lot to make sure that Apple can't go and censor podcasts with that directory that they used to have. I mean, a pseudo monopoly over. So the future does seem bright. And on that note, I mean, we've talked to Dr. Andrew Wakefield. We've talked to a lot of the guests about, what's been going on the past 2 years, but how much of your show changed with we'll call it the political wave, the influx of people that got interested in conspiracies because of politics, and then now this, even more so the lockdown influx, people who became super interested in this stuff because of the lockdown. I mean, it's
Yeah.
I mean, kind of acted in the same way that YouTube algorithm used to be, where people could, people were just surging these videos and finding information they had never seen before. It seems like that kind of happened on a smaller level with this last couple of years. What are your thoughts?
It's a strange thing that's happened. Right after the YouTube censorship started, there's a scramble to kind of jump to other platforms. A lot of independent content creators were looking for other platforms to go to, and it was just like a scramble. It's like the wild wild west. It still kind of is, and it's hard to tell, what's happening right now, because my show took off podcast wise after the censorship and after 2016. And on the video side, the YouTube, it's like nothing. There's they actually demonetized me on top of shadow banning. I'm still got some weird warning that doesn't allow me to do anything that's been on there for years. So as far as that and the major platforms, the censorship is hindering any type of growth in that way. But it seems like especially after 2020, when the whole COVID nonsense hit, that's when people started really wanting to find out on their own the information and going to independent platforms like Rockfin, and podcasting. And I think that's where a lot of people are turning to right now, is these alternative platforms to get their information from. And there's a huge amount of growth in those areas right now. And it's still kind of, like I said, like the wild wild west, because this is all so new for everybody in this field. I think that they're trying to actually accommodate the growth and try and grow with it at the same time for these independent platforms, while at the same time trying to compete with the old big like YouTube platforms used to do. So we're in a very interesting period right now when it comes to all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I mean, this isn't what people come to our shows for, this kind of tech talk, but I think it's incredibly important to have this kind of discussion because, you know, people who are subscribed to this show through Spotify or Apple, I mean, one night they might, you know, wake up one morning and our podcasts are not there anymore because
That's right.
Spotify makes that kind of YouTube decision and says, hey, these podcasts are not following our, you know, self-made policies and don't follow anything other than the rules we make, you know, and it's just corporatocracy to me. That's what
Yeah.
it feels like. There's no
Yeah, and that's why
freedom.
I'm always, harping on our audience to really support these independent platforms. And not only that, if these independent creators have websites, go to their websites, go directly to the source to get the information, to get their shows, to get their podcasts. It's just a matter of, plugging a different address in your browser or a different RSS feed, and, and not relying on the big platforms like YouTube or even some of the podcasts. If you can just plug in the RSS feed directly to that show or content creator, that would be ideal for everybody, and then we could separate ourselves from, this giant corporate media bullshit that's censoring everybody.
Exactly. That's right in line with why we started Alt Media United. I mean, all these podcasters out there like myself, it's not cheap to host your podcast, but then also to host a website too, you know. So we have a lot of podcasters who are Anchor hosted, right, which is owned by Spotify. And I always warn them, like, hey, that might not be the best deal. You're getting everything for free right now, but it might not pay off in the end. And there are definitely benefits to hosting your own website and podcast. But again, this is not the tech show. This is the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, Swapcast with Forbidden Knowledge News. So I got to ask you, going back to the root of the issue, does your family think you're crazy, and when did they first catch on? Because I feel like I know the answer, but when did it really occur to them that you were different?
I think as soon as I could speak, walk, or talk, they figured that one. Yeah, I'd always been pretty different. I was always the kind of black sheep of the family. I didn't like the normal things that my family was doing, the mainstream stuff, and I just kind of stayed to myself. And as a teenager, I fell into like the bad crowd, and the never really understood what they were trying to teach us in school. The history never made sense, religion, politics, and I just always questioned it from a young age. And when by the time my teenage years hit, I just wanted to shut it off. So I started, of course, doing drugs, alcohol, and sex, drugs, and rock and roll throughout teenage years, through most of my 20s, and just wanted to shut off everything because I didn't understand the way the world worked, and I thought it was just the world sucks. So why not party and get high and and avoid all that shit until I started waking up a little later in life. But that's yeah, they thought I was crazy from a young age, and we were never close. My parents had me when they were a little older, and I was a little younger. I was always the youngest and the black sheep of the family, and I always did my own thing. And it wasn't till like last year that they started coming around, and they actually listen to my show now, and they they respect what I do. They think some of the stuff is crazy, but they're actually questioning some of the stuff, which is really encouraging. So
Yeah.
that kind of flipped over a little bit.
Yeah, man. I
Yeah.
love to hear that. We've been hearing a lot of that from the guests, and I myself am definitely the black sheep of the family, and probably families that our families are friends with too. I'm the black sheep of those families as well. So there's definitely a lot of contentious sort of ideologies, I would say. And I don't want to, I'm an East Coast guy, so there's definitely a sort of traditional Catholic kind of thing going on over here. And what I noticed when I was a kid, much to your point, it didn't make sense. And it didn't seem like people even really cared that much about religion because they only did it once a week. And even if it was only for 2 hours in that one day a week. So it was like, it really never resonated with me. But I'm wondering what the catalyst was for you to maybe not question things, but what was the first indication that you were onto something?
Well, it wasn't one thing. I started looking at I think it was planetary changes first, and then it led me to CERN and some of the things they were doing there, and that led me to the occult and occult connections to politicians and elites and corporations and media, celebrities, all this stuff, just all these rabbit holes led one to another. And it wasn't one single thing. It was like all these things at once that I started to look at. And I want to run down the street yelling about pedophiles and corrupt banksters and stuff. But I learned real quick that you can't try to do that to or tell people who aren't ready. So I had to reel that back real quick. But I mean, it was really some of the occult stuff that really got me interested, and that led to the metaphysical connections, even ufology and things down that road. So that's what really got my eyes open and realizing that, even though most of the population doesn't believe in this stuff, and they'll turn a blind eye when you start talking about the elite sacrificing babies or drinking adrenochrome or something. But you know what? They sure as hell believe in these rituals, and there's definite proof that they've done them, and they still do these rituals and believe in a lot of this occult stuff. So that is your first indication that you should be looking into this stuff.
I would agree, man. Yeah, 100%. So, were there any? I mean, you mentioned that very familiar feeling of just like, being chicken little, the sky's falling, you got to warn everybody. And ultimately, you realize, like, hey, I can only change myself,
Oh,
can't
yeah.
change other people, can't change what other people think. But that leaves this sort of room for self discovery. And I think I heard you mention this with your conversation with Joe, which I definitely think people should check out and get that full story. We won't rehash it here unless you're willing. But you go and you go within to discover yourself, and it might not be through an occult ritual or ceremony, but it seems like psychedelics, or at least some of them, have these occult aspects that somehow, some way facilitate these moments of inner discovery. And that's certainly true for you. Am I wrong?
Oh yeah, that's definitely true, and it's quite a lengthy story. But if you want, I can give you the kind of cliff notes of how this all occurred, because this was a big shifting point in my life, and didn't really start with psychedelics. It started with meditation, and kind of the psychedelics got woven into it a little bit later. But
Okay.
it was about 2 years ago now, and the podcast had started to take off a little bit. I was in no way ready to make this my career. I was not making enough money off of the podcast to break off from my day job at the time. Not nearly enough. I was making a few hundred a month off of the podcast, which was like, a little bit extra for, groceries or whatever each month. So I wasn't even considering making this my career at this time. This was 2 years ago, or a little, almost 2 years ago. And I had just gotten out of a bad relationship, and I had a terrible day job. It was a good job. I mean, it was a nice corporate, cushy paying job, but I wasn't happy there. I hated it. I hated dealing with the people I was working with, and I didn't believe in what I was doing. And I wanted to I wanted to do this full time, but I wasn't ready to admit that I could do that. And it was a very interesting time. So I was going through that bad relationship in the job that I hated, trying to make this podcast thing work. And I eventually broke it off with the girl I was with. And at the same time I was trying to do meditation. And this one night I actually had to end up filing a restraining order on this lady, because she was a little insane. So that added to the stress of my situation that was happening. And I was outside talking to somebody about this whole situation, and I look up in the sky and I see these, like, this I just call it a UFO. It's these three orange flames that are in the sky in a triangular formation going straight up, and I'm just watching it. The person I'm talking to is oblivious, and it just stops in the middle of the sky, and I'm watching. I said, that's different. And all of a sudden it just takes off. shoots straight up at a ridiculous speed and disappears. It's gone. And I didn't really think much of it. I was like, wow, that was pretty cool. I don't know what it was. It could have been anything. Uh, that night, I start to meditate, and I had a problem with meditation. I could never go too far into it. I could never let myself go. I would always have this like deep seated fear for, I guess, from childhood. I grew up Catholic as well. And there was this childhood dogma like, oh, you're going to contact a demon if you, if you meditate or something like that, some stupid thing that was going on in my mind that was blocking me from going too deep into meditation. But that night I just told myself I got to do this, I'm super stressed. My life was sucking and I got to get some clarity on things. And I did. I ended up putting like on 432 hertz tones and just relaxing. And I really went deep into meditation. And to kind of shorten this up a bit, I made contact with an entity during this meditation session. And I was terrified at first because the way it approached me was like just a blue light. I could not see the entity. I could feel a presence and I could feel this extreme feeling of like love and acceptance. And it was like some kind of drug that I've never felt before. I knew I thought I loved my mom and dad, but I've never felt this intense feeling of love and acceptance before. And it would get stronger as this blue kind of light would approach my subconscious vision. And then it just started psychically communicating with me. And the communication was instantaneous, and I would communicate back with it psychically. And before I could even finish asking whatever this thing was a question, it would have the answer for me. And it was such a beautiful feeling I was getting from this being. And I was kind of scared at first. And I asked, in the name of Christ, are you good? And before I could even finish the statement, it was like, yes, and just sending me these beautiful waves of energy. And it was such a profound experience just being able to communicate with something that wasn't myself. And it was this knowing that this isn't me that I'm talking to. And the information that it was giving me was about myself, about actually, this was right after COVID hit. So it was communicating to me so that our future was going to start to get bumpy and we were going to experience some things that we had not experienced on this planet in a long time. And that I needed to prepare myself. And I had a very small task to do and a very collective, large undertaking on this planet that needed to occur to kind of shift our timeline to a correct direction. And it was very profound information, just mainly about myself and what I needed to do. And the biggest message was quit your job. And I was terrified of that. I was like, man, I'm making good money. I can't just quit my job. It's like they're like, you know what you're doing. You're already doing what you need to do. Just quit your job and do it. I was like, no. So this conversation went on for about an hour, and I, was arguing with this entity that I'm not going to quit my job. And they're like, yeah, you will. You'll do it. You'll be fine. And I was like, all right. So eventually the communication just faded away. And I needed like confirmation. I was like, what was that? What just happened? Was that like an acid flashback or something? I wanted it to occur again. So I tried again the next day. It didn't happen. I might have been trying too hard, or I don't know, frustrated. Then the third day, I tried it again. This time I had an intuitive thought to go to my bathtub and do it in water, meditate in water. And I put on the tones, did it in water. And this time it was even faster. I made contact with that entity, and this time I made contact with even more entities. I got the feeling of multiple beings surrounding me, emitting these incredible feelings of love. And all of a sudden, I could sense that I would be able to see these entities. My eyes were closed, and whenever I opened my eyes, I was still in my bathroom in my bathtub, and I closed my eyes, and then I'd be transported to what appeared to be, it looked like a ship. It looked like a spaceship of some sort. I was looking out these huge windows into space, and there was this metallic floor, and it looked like they had different layers or balconies or levels on this ship. And all of a sudden, these etheric entities started to appear around me. And some of them look like animal hybrids. Some of them look like, little bird humans, and so one of them looked like a frog. And they were all emitting these beautiful feelings of love. They were slightly translucent, kind of looked like little slightly translucent greenish ghost hybrid animal beings. And I know that sounds fucking nuts, but that's what I saw in my mind's eye. And this was before psychedelics. This was before I started experimenting with that. I had done psychedelics before as a kid, but not in a spiritual manner, and I never experienced anything like that. And this time was just through meditation, and it was very
Wow.
profound. These entities started to communicate with me again, just giving me more information, asking me if I was ready to accept whatever task I had on this planet. I don't remember some of the exact things that were said. It was very profound, and I came out of it. And for the rest of that day, just remember getting downloads of information. You got to do this. You got to read this. You got to start doing this. Quit your job. Quit your job. Quit your job. That kept on running through my head. And again, I came out of that, and I wanted more proof. I was like, this, I got to do this again. This was, amazing. And there was still a part of me that doubted it. The final day that this occurred without any psychedelics or anything, I had like severe stomach pain that day. And I was in such pain, I couldn't even get out of bed. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to meditate, see what will happen. And I got in contact with this entity again while through the meditation, and asked if they could heal me. And I was like, can you guys do something about this stomach pain? And the message I got was, well, you can do that yourself. And as soon as they started, like, I started getting these feelings of intense love, the pain was gone. And it was very profound. And I'd never experienced anything like that before, because I have stomach problems, and that never went away in the manner that it did. So it was kind of like a confirmation for me. And another one of the downloaded messages I got was that if I wanted to make instant contact with any of them, psilocybin or any type of these like ayahuasca or psychedelics would facilitate an immediate connection. And I found that interesting. So I did. I acquired some magic mushrooms, and for a couple of months, about once or twice a month, I would do sessions and make contact with these entities and have little conversations. I haven't done it in a while, but I would gladly do it again. But that was what kind of changed my life, because about 4 or 5 months after that, I quit my job just because I couldn't take it anymore. I took out my life savings. I moved to Denver, Colorado, just a place I've always wanted to be, near the mountains, and started pumping out shows, just doing this full time. And at first it was terrifying. Like, the show was not making money. But within a couple of months and diligence and just manifestation, it started happening. Like, one day I looked at our account and I was able to pay rent. I'm like, holy shit, we can pay rent this month. And then the next month I'm like, we can eat as well as pay rent. And it just, got better and better. And it was amazing. I'm so grateful to be where I am, and I owe it all to pushing myself to have that experience, because I was ready for it. I wanted to have that experience, and I was ready to go to the next level with my spirituality and my, physical existence here. And I kind of just pushed myself to do it. So yeah, that's how it happened there.
Wow. Yeah. And thank you for sharing that again. Yeah.
Of course.
I'm sure you've told that story many times, and it is worth telling, because it's that like intergalactic teach a man to fish type thing. These beings come to you and they have this experience with you, but their message isn't like, it's not I guess unconsensual. It's very consensual, and it's very much like, hey, you're meant to do this without our help, but if you need any help, just ask. There's no intervention. I guess that's the word that I was looking for.
Well, I
And
have
you,
a greater understanding that they're kind of like a cosmic family, like our spirit guides, part of our ancestry, part of our higher selves, just part of something in our DNA. Cosmic ancestors is the best way that I can describe it.
Right. Right. Yeah. And when you bring to mind, or when you describe the, glowing animals, I mean, it brings to mind this concept of spirit animal, which for me has never manifested in an ethereal way. I've yet to have any visions on that level, but red-tailed hawks have a huge synchronistic at least symbol in my life. They've become that, especially listening to podcasts. And I'd have this thought over and over as I was delivering packages for Amazon, the worst, that like I could be doing this, I could be doing a podcast. And for whatever reason, I just wasn't, nothing was stopping me other than myself. And I would see these red-tailed hawks all the time. And it always at those moments when I was thinking, I should do this. And sure enough, I start doing it. And Michael Wan, I think he's been on your show before. You've spoken with Michael Wan.
Yeah.
One day I'm talking to Mike on the phone, just driving my car, and I'm driving and I look up ahead. It looks like there's a fox in the road. And we drive a little further, not a fox. It's a red-tailed hawk, just like, taking on some roadkill. And I drove within, a foot of this red-tailed hawk and just looked him in the eyes while Mike was on the phone. And to me, that was like a huge sync, because then a couple months later, Mike and I started doing a podcast together called Your Handbook for the Apocalypse. So I completely resonate with what you've said there. And yeah, I think it's really inspiring. People hit me up all the time saying, hey, I want to start a podcast. Thanks for doing what you do. And I'm sure you get that all the time, because this is the new oral tradition. This is the way that we are meant to learn. And I think it's so interesting to see how the other realms, as you put, our family, are higher, the families, wherever they are. I'm still kind of at a loss for words on how to perfectly describe it.
Oh, yeah.
But they're encouraging this kind of thing very clearly, because you have, however many hours of really awesome information out there on the internet available to people. And I mean, seems like they're benefiting from that, right? I mean, what else have you learned since doing the show that's kind of resonated with that initial inspiration?
Well, oh man, I learned something every day doing this show. One of the biggest things that I'm kind of into lately is positivity, the power of positive thinking, and living without fear and not participating in some of the bullshit that's happening. I think there's a couple of different timelines going on right now. There's one where people are living in fear and their lives are crumbling into shit because they're letting fear consume them, and fear is like one of the biggest it's one of the biggest problems we're facing in society, especially right now. And it's one of the biggest tools being used by the powers in control to keep us where they want to keep us. And I've learned that if you just kind of go by your own timeline, worry about your own life, spread positivity, be happy, don't participate in the bullshit that they're trying to show you on TV. Turn off your TV, don't watch the TV, go outside and look at the sky, go for a walk, talk to nature. Nature will tell you more reality than the fucking TV will. I think that one of the biggest things I've learned is just to follow your own path, not worry about what anyone else is doing or thinking. And, as selfish as it sounds, you got to focus on you before you can do anything for anyone else and get your shit ready. Because that's really all there is your existence, because that's it. You're not living in anyone else's existence. And if you're not going to take care of yours, what else is there really? And I think that once people kind of start focusing on their own path and realize that if their path is positive and pure and full of love, then it will cause a ripple into other people's timelines and other people's paths. And hopefully it could manifest a better reality for everyone. And that's one of the biggest things that I've learned.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I've felt the synchronicity through feeling positive, thinking positive, and then acting on those opportunities that come synchronistically. Because as you put it, who's going to love you if you don't love yourself, or who's going to take care of you if you don't take care of yourself? And when you start to do that, those opportunities come, by the dozens, and some even knock at your door, but yeah. I guess my question really was more aiming at like, have you spoken with anybody who has kind of confirmed that experience, like met other experiencers who
Oh
have
yeah.
maybe even interacted with similar beings?
Yes, dozens. I immediately got on the phone with a couple of experiencer friends of mine after it happened, and got extreme confirmation. Just very similar things that happened to them. But not only that, some of the messages that were given. I had a psychic friend that had actually witnessed this happen before it happened, and he told me about it. It just all kinds of confirmations that this is a real phenomenon. But the most important thing is it's a very personal phenomenon and different for each person, and that's why I think that it'll never be understood in the mainstream, and people that ask for proof or want to see proof on a grand scale, like in a laboratory or something. Like they're not going to get that, because I've come to realize this is not only a very personal, but it's a very spiritual experience. No matter what your experience, whether you're being taken on a ship by an alien or you're talking to an angel, I think it's all part of the same phenomenon. And I think it's all part of giving us a better standing of ourselves in our lives. For example, if you get abducted by an ET and they're doing experiments on you, and I think that this is all something to wake up humanity right now and get us realizing that we're part of something bigger than ourselves, but we each experience it in a different way. And I think whatever way it manifests is whatever way we're ready to handle it at the time. Like if we're into aliens, it may manifest as an alien abduction. If we're into angels or demons, it may manifest in that way. And our state of mind probably dictates whether it's going to be positive or negative, right?
Absolutely. And, after speaking with this gentleman who I noticed you also had on your show, and thank you for doing that, because this is someone who, up until I interviewed him, I don't think he had done any podcast interviews, at least in the past couple years, Peter Shampoo. And towards the end of our conversation, he mentioned in a really disconcerted way archons. And I found obviously, archome, geometry, archon. That's what his whole book's about, is about arcs. And foolishly, I didn't really ask him anything about the archons, but I think it was really interesting and a little chilling to hear it from someone who's studied the, ley lines in the grid as much as he has, that, he has a sense that there is maybe a malevolent force out there. And much to the point of like, the light beings not intervening, it seems like there is a little bit of a battle between the dark and the light, but the light can't just come here and conquer the darkness for us. We have to do that ourselves. Is that similar to what you found?
Yeah, for sure. I think that you're 100% spot on. I think that these entities cannot physically intervene. They can't force us to do anything. They can't, make these changes that they want themselves in our lives. So I think that they have to whisper in our ears and maybe encourage us and do other things to get us to do either their bidding or realize that we have our own free will and have our own destinies, and should make our own decisions. The negative entities may be here to for service to self, and they want a certain reality, and they can't. The only way they can manifest it is by whispering in the ears of people who are resonating on the same frequency as them, and maybe have made contact with them on a certain level, or certain bloodlines, generational families that have this negative frequency entities attached to them in some way. And on the other side, these entities of light, if you choose to contact them and if you're ready and you seek them out, they can in turn give you information to help yourself out. I think that's probably how it works. Kind of like a prime directive type thing.
Indeed, yeah. Now, going back to Peter, I mean, just based off the fact that we both interviewed him, it's a mutual interest that I don't get to, share with many people. Have ley lines or like the energy of the land. There's a proper term for it. I always forget it. Has that played a significant role in your life? Is that a new subject to you, or have you experienced that kind of energy in possibly the place where you experienced these initial experiences? Was there any sort of geographic features to that experience?
That's an interesting question. I never thought about that. It is a relatively new topic for me, and I know at the time I was in South Louisiana, and there is a huge native culture down there. There's mounds very close to where I was staying there. I mean, so it's very possible there could have been some kind of electromagnetic earth energy involved. I couldn't say for sure, and I never really experienced it firsthand, but I do find it super fascinating, especially if you look at areas that have concentrated high strangeness like Skinwalker Ranch, Blind
Mm,
Frog Ranch, Mount Shasta, Sedona, Arizona, all these places that seem to have like concentrations of UFO sightings, Bigfoot, paranormal activity, and they coincide with these high energy places of electromagnetisms or ley lines where these ley lines cross directly. And I find that super interesting that it could be because of this massive energy in from inside the earth that could be opening up a sort of portals in these areas and allowing these entities to pop in and out of our existence. So that's just my theory of what could possibly be going on in some of those areas attached to ley lines and then these high energy places.
yeah, well, and also, the Mississippi River comes to mind too, being like the border
Yes.
of Louisiana there on what is it, the eastern side, and
Mhm.
and also, this kind of odd voodoo culture that made its way from Haiti and possibly from Africa up to Louisiana. I think there's a lot of elements at play there that could have created the atmosphere for that
I tell you what,
experience.
man, the South is dense. It has some dense energy. I really had to get out of here. Like I lived in the South almost my whole life, in South Louisiana, then South Florida. Even in South Florida, the energy is pretty dense and pretty low in a lot of places. But you're right. There's a lot of negativity attached to a lot of places, especially when you get close to New Orleans. I can definitely feel the energy, especially after my experiences. Something kind of blew open inside me, and I became more intuitive. I was able to sense people's feelings and emotions a little bit more after, and pick up on energy from places after I had those experiences with my guides, I guess you could say. But yeah, that's one of the big reasons why I wanted to get out of the South in Louisiana, is because that after that experience, I couldn't take the feeling this dense energy all the time, and it got stronger after that incident. And I was like, man, this is too low vibe for me. And out here in the mountains in Colorado, we're out at probably going to move out near Loveland here soon, which is out closer to the mountains. Is beautiful out here, and the energy is amazing. Very very high vibe energy, and I can feel a major difference. So yeah, you're definitely right about that.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I've been to Denver once or twice back in 2016, as a matter of fact. And I remember the Shining Lotus Metaphysical Store being just this huge repository. Like, I'd never been at that point in my life, I'd never been to a bookstore that had categories like theosophy and then like a whole category about Freemasonry. Like, for the most of my life, it was like one section, occult, that's it, nothing, nothing outside of that section.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of really interesting people, a lot of interesting sites up there in Denver. I'm sure you know all about the airport there.
Yeah.
But you did mention Blind Frog Ranch. I'd never heard of that before. Maybe that's not in Colorado, but can you tell us more about that?
That is a newer one that they're looking into. I believe that this one is in Utah as well, in southern Utah. It's just like Skinwalker. They've got all kinds of crazy concentrated paranormal activity, UFOs, and it's in it's been caught on camera at this ranch. Gentleman, his name escapes me, but he recently did a presentation about it at the recent UFO conference in Laughlin. And I think his presentation is available online at their website. But it was really fascinating, some of the stuff that's occurring there. And he's just a regular guy that owns the ranch and witnessed some of this stuff and took pictures. But it's mainly lots of poltergeist activity, lots of gray aliens seen around there, strange fuzzy white Bigfoot, and lots of UFOs and weird lights in the sky.
Fuzzy white Bigfoot. That's
Fuzzy white
interesting.
Bigfoot, yes.
Maybe they're climbing through some subterranean cavern from the Himalayas or something. That's interesting. But the frog, though, I did find that point interesting because of, and maybe you didn't mention this here today, but you did mention, at least in the conversation I had listened to, that one of the entities that visited you had the appearance of a frog. And I found that so fascinating because we have multiple different species of frog that have psychedelic, I guess, chemicals or biochemicals. Some of them are in the form of venom. Some of them are like secretions, but multiple different frogs on the earth have these psychedelic chemical aspects to their biology.
Yeah. That is interesting. And the frog actually never appeared when I was using the psychedelics. It was
Right.
just the first time. After whenever I was using psilocybin, it was different types of entities still giving me the same types of feelings, but never was the same. It was always different types of kind of animal hybrid beings that I would encounter along the way.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is only because I had just been reading a book about it, but it kind of rings like the fairy lore type stuff where like the spirits of the forest, like
Mhm.
frogs and toads and whatnot. But yeah, very interesting stuff, man. I wonder, given this show and everything that you've put out, are there any topics that you feel like you haven't gotten to yet, that you're still like, any areas that you're like really unsatisfied in and you want to get to? Like, what can folks expect the direction of Forbidden Knowledge News to take?
Forbidden Knowledge News has always been all over the place. I mean, there's not anything that I don't cover. There's probably not anything I wouldn't cover. I would go, any direction, anywhere. I'm not scared to go anywhere. But I will be honest, I've only done like a half of a flat earth show. There's just been something about the flat earth topic that I find polarizes people so much, and I don't like the negativity that it brings. Like, I find it a fascinating topic. I find it, it's a great topic. It's very interesting, and it's super interesting that no astrologers and astrophysicists will debate some of the points that a lot of flat earthers make. But I'm not a flat earther, and I'm not, diehard globe round or whatever you want to call it. I really don't, I don't really subscribe to either. I'm more of like, this is a simulation and we're in some sort of holographic reality type thing. But I just find the negativity that surrounds the flat earth thing just kind of gets a bit much. But I am not opposed to doing a flat earth show, and I would love to actually have like a flat earth debate like Sam has had on some of his shows. I think that would be really fun. But yeah, that's probably one of the only things that I haven't really delved into that much lately, and it's not for any other reason than I don't want people to be killing each other in our chat room over the shit,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I hear it. Yeah, I'm definitely open-minded to all of it, and I don't really particularly like the flat Earth comments that we get in the YouTube videos that we do put out, but whatever. They're
Yeah.
entitled to their opinions.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you bring that up because I find theories like the electric universe model and like maybe the ancient aspects of these bodies in the sky, whether we can visit them or not. I find that stuff so fascinating that when I hear people tell me that it's all a dome and there's nothing on the other side of it, it's just like cut throughs and light, it feels more interesting to go and like look at David Talbot's work and like dive into that arena rather than just shut it all off as impossible and a NASA fabrication. So that being said, what are your thoughts on this like Saturn sort of movement? Whether it's real or not, it seems like a lot of finger pointing has been directed at this Saturn cult. And I've heard it mentioned, on Sam's show. I've heard it mentioned on a bunch of different podcasts. Troy McLaughlin has done a lot of cool research on that. But what are your thoughts on this Saturn concept?
I think that the theory holds a lot of water. I think that there are a lot of these elite cults that are still involved with this Saturn worship, and I think it manifests throughout a lot of aspects of what we see in Hollywood and the media, and even politics, and some of the hidden messages that they're showing in the news and media. I think it kind of permeates through everything, and it's pretty obvious that they're using Saturnian imagery and a lot of these occult aspects that they're throwing them in our face, and that they do subscribe to this Saturn worship, and they probably are a lot deeper involved in it than many would like to admit. And I think that it holds a lot of water, and I think that we should be doing a lot more research into what goes involved with these elite practices, and what kind of occult ancient practices are they involved with.
Right. Right. And you again with the cults, the elite groups, they are so shrouded that you often get like in that same flat earth kind of vein, you get these camps that are formed where they're like, no, it was only the Freemasons that are responsible for it, or no, the Rosicrucians are the only people that could have done it. And that being said, do you fall towards maybe blaming it on one group or another? Is there one group that's come up more than any other, or is it just like that whole logic is not going to lead anywhere anyways?
Well, yeah, I don't think that would it lead anywhere, but I think it's a combination of a lot of many groups really that are
Right.
kind of, I don't want to say battling, but fighting for control over certain aspects of humanity. And I think that these are all just royal families that are from these ancient bloodlines that feel they have the divine right to rule throughout the ages, and they've been inbred into royalty and into ruling and into these positions for hundreds and thousands of years. And I don't think they're ever going to give up these positions, and I don't think these families always get along necessarily, and I don't think they're all of one group. I think there are different groups around the world that are very wealthy and very elite and have occult beliefs and different manners of getting their agendas across. And I think that, yeah, they come together to make certain decisions at times, but I think they also battle at times, and they also fight each other and don't always agree. And I don't think it's a straight up pyramid type structure. I think it's more of like a battle royale type situation where these elite families don't always have the same agendas for humanity, and you know, they might be fighting at times. So I think
Yeah.
that's more likely than just a straight up pyramid structure.
I would agree with you there. I mean, I was having a conversation with my girlfriend yesterday, and it kind of came up like, oh, well, the media is not as simple as one company owns the media. It's that simple in the United States. 6 companies own all of the media subsidiaries, but when it comes to this global contingency theory, I just don't subscribe to it. I think it's much more complicated than that. And I think there's probably countries where, we never learn the truth about what they really believe in because we're only getting the propagandized version of these countries. One country that comes to mind is Russia. Like there's an author, you might have interviewed him, Gary Lockman, who's written a book called Holy Russia, and it goes into the whole spiritual culture of Russia. And what do we hear about Russia? We hear they're dumb brutes, and they have no, communism destroyed their culture. And you read a book like Gary's and you find there's so much going on there that you just wouldn't you wouldn't see. So I don't know. I'm kind of losing what I
But
what I
yeah,
was.
that I mean, you're right. They just want to keep they want to keep our mindset simplified
Hmm.
as to what the reality is of what other countries cultures are and what's really going on around the world. They want to keep us inside this little Americanized box. So we don't so we think that we're still the best, biggest, best and baddest military industrial corporate complex that there is on the planet. So yeah, of course they do that.
Yeah. Well, and then that being said, what are your thoughts on, these things that we see in the sky? I mean, you've had some odd experiences through meditation. A lot of people that I've talked to say that maybe there are aliens out there running these craft. Some people talk about no, these are just a breakaway civilization of different human beings who are, trying to give us the impression that it's some off-world entity. What are your thoughts on that whole can of worms?
That is a can of worms, man. My thoughts on this change constantly. It's constantly either evolving or devolving or going to complete shit on this because it's a deep topic, and I think that it's something that we may never understand. But I think there's definitely a lot of intentional misinformation going on about the whole UFO topic, especially right now. Me personally, I think, like I said earlier, especially contact experiences are so personal. It's not ever going to be something that a bunch of people would experience or like on a grand scale, like a UFO is going to land on the White House and aliens are going to get out and present themselves. I'm not sure about the whole alien thing. I don't know if these are little green men coming from across the galaxy on their ships. I don't know if it's even a physical phenomenon at all. Um, I'm wondering if it's some sort of just grand intelligence that can manifest itself through our consciousness in different ways and cause us to see whatever it wants us to see, like a grand type of trickster entity that could
Mm,
manifest as a UFO in the sky or manifest as a gray alien or a Bigfoot or whatever it wants to be. Or it could be, part of a program, part of this simulated reality where, it's programmed to every once in a while pop up a UFO in the sky. Or it could be, like I said, part of a grand intelligence. I think a lot of what we're seeing in the sky, though, is from our military industrial complex. A lot of it is drones, and it's just being mistaken or intentionally put out there to confuse the whole UFO topic. Because there's a lot of fear surrounding the UFO topic, not with like the people, but I don't know if you've ever heard like the congressmen and senators, especially the old school ones, saying that it's demons and they know for a fact that it's demonic and we got to watch out for this stuff. But when you hear stuff like that, it's kind of like, okay, well, if you know for a fact it's demons or anything that's not human, shouldn't we be looking into it anyway? I mean, if it's something other than what we consider normal reality, we should just leave it alone. And I don't know. I don't understand what the mentality of our government is with this disclosure stuff. You have half of them saying it's demonic and we shouldn't touch it, and the other half wondering if it's a threat, and then the other half saying it's the swamp gas. So I don't trust anything coming out of mainstream disclosure, and I wouldn't advise anyone to pay it any attention at all because I don't think we're ever going to get any information out of that. I think a lot of the old school UFO researchers are kind of stuck on the nuts and bolts path, and they're afraid to explore any other kind of spiritual or consciousness aspects of this. I think there's too many other connections to paranormal activity and um, uh, a lot of the metaphysical, unexplained things and non physical things that occur surrounding abductions and contact experiences, to where I'm questioning if it's a physical experience at all and if it's somehow just connected to a greater intelligence that we can't perceive. And the other thing I lean towards is just an interdimensional phenomenon where there are different realities surrounding us at all times that we can't see. And there's life in those dimensions. It just beyond the spectrum of our vision. And there's entities that can pop in and out of those existences into our reality at will. And they do. And there's a whole spectrum of life, and that would explain, aliens, angels, demons. So that's the kind of two options that I bounce back and forth between.
Yeah, yeah, and it makes sense as to what Philip K. Dick did. I don't know how familiar you are with him, but that came up on a recent podcast I did. And Philip K. Dick, when asked how he was inspired to write all these books, he would always explain it as, I didn't, come up with this stuff. I actually experienced these things in another realm, whether he was dreaming, whether he was like going somewhere mentally, but it does seem like consciousness is the key. And very well said there, because it seems like it is intimate, as you pointed out, and you never quite can explain these things to another person, because as soon as you start to explain some of these more extreme experiences to somebody who has no familiarity, it just sounds crazy to them, quite frankly,
Yeah.
hence the name of the show. But, I've never had any experiences that totally stand out. So it was interesting hearing that your experience happened after you'd started the podcast. Is that correct? You kind of became familiar
Yeah.
with this stuff in this way?
I never had any paranormal personal experiences that I remember. I mean, I had unusual probably amount of missing time as a kid. I don't know if that's anything to do with the amount of drugs I did as a teenager, but yeah, I never had anything strange or paranormal happen before that experience that I kind of sought out myself.
Now, when you say missing time, you mean like memories you can't account for, or do you mean like other
Like, I don't
people?
remember a huge chunk of my childhood, like years I don't remember, which is very strange. So
Yeah, well, and then, given what you're saying about reality jumping, I mean, have you ever pondered whether split realities at some point, and then, and
I've
that
pondered that. Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
I think that's what we might be dealing with, in that butterfly effect kind of way, like your choices in this now moment. That's why we say at the end of the episode, enjoy the moment wherever you are in the now, because somebody might be listening to this at 3 a.m. Somebody might be listening to this in the morning when they wake up. So I can't say good night, folks, but this is a confluence of realities, this like nexus point happening right in front of you. And based on what choices you make, you could end up, who knows, in a in an underground world, like they say in the fairy tales. You eat the fairy food and you end up underground. It definitely
Yeah, that's
feels
kind of
like.
like one of the manifestation techniques that I learned to use. If you want to put yourself in a better reality, imagine that each door you walk through is a different reality, but a better one. Even if you're going into a shower, that when you exit the shower and you're clean, you open the shower curtain, you're entering a new reality, a better one where things are just a little better than they were before. And maybe you don't have this problem that you had, or maybe you don't have this worry that you were worrying about before. And each time you walk through a door, go in a shower, walk through, a different room, your reality gets a little better. And that's something that a little technique that I've learned and actually practice. And hey, man, it works. It works for me at least.
Yeah, yeah. We've had similar advice from Brandon Thomas, host of the Expanding Reality podcast.
Yeah.
He had a shower portal, is what he called it. So yeah, that's very interesting. You know, I've had some experiences recently looking into the stone structures in New England. And it seems like this concept was built into these structures because these sites, they're made for a couple people to go inside of, these little like stone hut type, stone chambers is actually the proper word for them. And to me, it feels like, you walk in, you go into this dark, cold, sort of, but comfortable spot. The sun comes through because a lot of them are astronomically aligned with certain holes in the chamber, so the light will come through on certain days. And then you walk out in this new reality. That's really what comes to mind when I see these structures. But oh man, I'm losing. Oh, okay. So Ross Ben, you're
Yeah.
familiar with Ross, right?
Oh yeah.
When I went to Philadelphia, he showed us this really strange tomb, the tomb of the hermit, right? And now it's kind of like haunted and spooky, and there's like a bad aura around it. But it's to that same point that you're making. You go into one reality and you step out in a new reality. These like sort of, I think they're called hermit's chambers in the case of what Ross showed us. But up here in New England, they're called stone chambers, and they're very interesting things you can find just in the forest, in certain forests.
Oh yeah, man. I find it fascinating how malleable reality can be.
Mm,
And manifestation techniques, if you're dabbling in that and you can witness the power that it has, it's incredible. Even, just some of the positive thinking, and the way you treat other people, and you can see that the things that'll start to occur the following days, and just the ripples and energy that can come back. It's very profound. And a lot of people think that's woo woo BS, but start practicing yourself. Start just believing in a different reality, and thinking that things are going to be better, and don't focus on the negative. And you'll see some profound changes in your life for sure.
thank you. Yeah. Is there any other manifestation tips you can share with us here?
Um, well, the only other thing that I've used is I guess you could kind of say it's like a form of sigil magic, where you would focus on an image and attach it to something you desire, and then kind of keep that image and desire in your mind for a prolonged amount of time, and it'll eventually manifest into something. It could be attached to money or love or whatever. But I have used that for money before, when I was very low in finances and terrified of not being able to pay my rent whenever I first moved out here. And it's just basically putting your intent out there to manifest something to come back to you in your life, and it works.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I remember learning this technique called the bowl meditation. I think it was from Greg Carlwood's show. And I've tried it just in the van while as I heard it, I'm like, all right, pause, let me try it. And I meditated, I visualized this bowl. And I think driving facilitates a sort of meditation, maybe just for me, but that definitely helped. I visualized this bowl, much like you said, an image, and I saw a coin falling into the bowl. And I didn't really have much intention other than I just wanted to try and see if it would actually work. And a part of what the man who was on the show that day, I forget his name, the guest, I think it was Mike Centenia, but I could be wrong. And he said, just forget about it. Hold this image in your mind, but then let it go, forget about it. And it was funny. A couple weeks later, I worked at a farmer's market as well as being a delivery guy at this time. And somebody walks by our table, looks at the bread, and I'm looking over here doing something, and I hear like a clunk, like a heavy clunk on the table. And I look down, and I swear, Chris, there's a piece of gold on the table, like a chain, around it, one of these sort of, I think they're like banknotes or something. But either way, my friend and I were working at this farmer's market stand. We're like, what the heck? Who would leave something like this behind? So we held on to it. And my buddy was like way more afraid that somebody was going to come back than me. I was like, let's take it to the pawn shop and sell it. He's like, no, no, we have to hold on to it. So we held on to it for like 3 weeks. Nobody came back to claim it. Go to the jewelry shop, and they gave us $1,600 for that thing, man.
Oh man.
And that, to me, I was like, I didn't connect the dots until afterwards. It was one of those hindsight type things. So I guess that was one of the instances in my life where manifestation was like, oh wow, this works. And there's a sort of a method to it. It doesn't always work the way you think it's going to
Yeah,
work,
yeah.
but
Right.
there's sort of a method.
Definitely, definitely so. And I would also say there's a lot, it has a lot to do with your intent behind what you're asking for, because I'm sure it can have a lot of negative consequences. My intent has always been, towards good things and towards positive things for other people as well. So, I never tried to manifest any harm or anything negative. I'm sure that doesn't work out for the best for people.
Yeah, no, the old I think it's like a Wiccan phrase, whatever you put out comes back thrice,
Yeah.
3 times. So if you're putting out bad, you're going to get three
Yeah.
times as worse as you gave to somebody else. But yeah, I definitely feel like in this space that you've pioneered, a really awesome show in, there is that sort of looming, like it's almost like you're walking a tightrope. Like you can go the black pill direction and the show can be kind of one way, or you can stay on the hope and like exploration, discovery. I don't want to say light because you do get into heavy topics, but there's never, I can tell just by talking to you here that there's no doom and gloom aspect to Forbidden Knowledge News.
No, even the dark, deep topics we're talking, like, say I have a guest talk about depopulation. I always try to offer solutions for that at the end of the show to counter what we just discussed, and try and add a little glimmer of hope for the audience at the end, because I have hope, and I would hope everyone would.
Right on. Yeah. And you should, man. You definitely have showed us some tips and some advice here today on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast and the Forbidden Knowledge News podcast, because it's a swap cast, folks. So thank you if you're listening to this show for the first time. I hope this isn't stuff you've heard Chris talk about before, but yeah, man, this has been fun. I appreciate you joining me. I always ask the question, does your family think you're crazy? You answered that one. I guess maybe, ending on that solutions-based note, anything in mind, like for folks, any solutions that you've come across recently? I know you talked to Jim Gale. That would be a solution I give people,
Yeah,
turn your
for
turn your
sure.
yard into a garden. But anything
Yeah.
else like that on that side of things that you've come across lately?
Yeah, I mean, just basically become as self-sufficient as you can. Just like you were mentioning, maybe, if you can get your garden, if you have any way of not relying on the government, not relying on any handouts, not relying on any of the institutions that we currently have. If you can become as independent and independently sustainable as possible, that's probably a great idea right now. And other than that, I would just say, just what I was talking about earlier: follow your own timeline. Don't don't participate with the bullshit. Don't That's the simplest thing that I can, the simplest solution that I think we can offer everyone right now is, if you don't participate, they don't have any way of continuing these negative agendas that's going on right now. And I think that's the easiest solution for a lot of things that we're facing. Just follow your own timeline, make it as positive as possible. Don't pay attention to the bullshit. Go with your gut. Your gut, your gut is your second brain there. So that's a big one. And that's probably some of the best advice that I can give people.
Thank you, brother. I
Well,
appreciate it. And I
yeah.
appreciate you sharing your time with us here today. And yeah, with that, folks, thank you for listening to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Have a great moment wherever you are in the now.